Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs, and all of you, the members of the Post-Geek Singularity community. Once again, it's time for Robservations, the show about something. And I'm Rob. I'm Robert Meyer Burnett, your host. And it's great to have you here. This is Robservations number 242. My God, the only reason I'm here is because of you. And also, I'm here because of Lucky Tiger Men's grooming products for those men who want to look good and feel great. And please go to their website at getluckytiger.com. They have many great products. They make me want to grow facial hair every time I go there. And if you like any of their stuff, and you should, and you know I love the facial scrub and I love the all-over body wash, if you punch in PGS for the Post-Geek Singularity community, when you check out, you'll get 20% off your order. Even if you've gone there before, you'll still get 20% off your order, which is amazing. Well, ladies and gentlemen, gentle beings of every shape, size, sexual orientation, religious belief system, political affiliation, whoever you are welcome here as members of the Post-Geek Singularity community. And by God, I got to say, this is now, I'm into month 10 of doing this show. And I don't think there has ever been as much chatter about anything as there is about the Joker. People are talking, everyone, and I think at the end of the day, to have a movie elicit such passionate response or intelligent discourse, or just yelling and screaming is a good thing, and it's very, very exciting. I, of course, have gone on record saying that I think the Joker is an incredibly important film, especially in terms of the comic book genre. I did review it last Friday. Well, not really review it, but I talked about my thoughts. And while I did say I very much admired the craft of the filmmaking and the performances and the way it was made, that the story left me a little flat, basically because there were things that I was missing. And if you want to go back and watch that show, you can. But boy, have people written into me to tell me not necessarily that I'm wrong, but that they disagree. And I love that. If I wanted sycophantic, I wouldn't want that. I don't like that. I love disagreement, and I love the disagreement we have here because it's cogent, it's intelligent, it's usually well reasoned, and I quite enjoy it. I love the free flow of ideas. That's what I like most about this show. So I've got a bunch of letters to read about it, but I wanted to read this quick article that was actually also sent to me by a fellow imagination connoisseur. And this was an article, and again, every time I read an article from somewhere, I always get these messages about, oh, that place is trash or whatever. Well, there's a lot of British tabloids that I'm sure are trashy. I don't know. I haven't figured out what is the equivalent of the New York Times in the UK. Is there an unassailable a newspaper there that everybody agrees with? I don't know. I mean, I just look at things. This was sent to me. This is from the Daily Mail. I know, not the best reputation, but it was sent to me as something to talk about. So I figured before I get into everybody disagreeing with me, I was going to read this little article because I found it interesting. That was in the Daily Mail. It's way too terrifying. Joker viewers around the world walk out of movie theaters and urge cinemas to ban the ultraviolent film, saying it glamorizes gun crime and deals with mental health issues in a triggering way. Some moviegoers bashed Joker on Twitter and said they walked out. A fan claimed Joker was too terrifying considering what's going on in the world. Others are raving about the twisted R-rated portrayal of Batman's nemesis. The film is raking in cash, breaking the October opening day box office record. So far, there have been no serious incidents despite fears of a shooting. One theater in California shut down for a night after police received a credible threat. In Manhattan, a disruptive patron was escorted out after scaring moviegoers. Police across the nation have high security in place for Joker screenings. Look, there's a lot of hysteria whipped up about this movie before it opened. It was going to become the new incel anthem that was going to cause men who are frustrated sexually to run out with their guns and shoot up movie theaters, issuing manifestos all over the place. There was a lot of hysteria. This article goes on to say Joker's continuing to stir controversy on its opening weekend after some fans stormed out of theaters around the world saying the movie was too disturbing and triggering. The R-rated supervillains flick smashed October opening day box office records after taking up 39.9 million in domestic ticket sales on Friday and is on pace to take an eye-watering 92 million weekend total. It's been up 93 million weekend. But not everyone is embracing the dark, ultraviolet film, which sees Joaquin Phoenix portray Arthur Fleck, the embattled clown who later transforms into Batman's most iconic nemesis. One fan wrote on Twitter, literally just walked out of a screening of Joker, way too terrifying to be in there with all this going on, the way the movie glamorizes gun violence and mental health issues. Others have gone as far as calling the movie to be banned from theaters, saying that promotes violence and could even inspire a mass shooting. Thus far on opening weekend, there have been no reports of violence at screenings after police across the nation went on high alert and beefed up security at theaters. There have been isolated disruptions at screenings, though nothing so serious as an actual shooting. In Huntington Beach, California, one theater canceled 2 screenings Thursday night after receiving a threat. In New York City, police responded to a screening after one audience member sparked fears by spitting on others and clapping loudly every time the Joker killed someone. Fearing he had ill intentions, police escorted the man out of the theater. A witness reported the man had poured a bottle of tequila into his slushie before the movie began. Shit was scary, like a 4D movie experience, a witness tweeted. Then it goes on and on and on and on and on. Some fans unprepared for the movie's dark intensity took to Twitter to reveal they had walked out of screenings. Anyway, everyone wants to make something about this. I think what's really great about Joker is there was no violence, first of all. All of those fears were unfounded, but apparently there's a lot of people still wondering whether this movie should have been made. Is it about mental illness? Absolutely. But what I find really great about this film, as with all great cinema, is that it's started a discussion, the likes of which I am so tired of people talking about. I'm even tired of myself talking about The Force Awakens or Last Jedi. I'm really sick of it because ultimately those films, as much as I've loved Star Wars since it came out when I was 10 years old, they don't matter to real life in terms of making a commentary about how we live our daily lives. They just don't, unless you I guess identify as a Jedi Knight, then perhaps they do. But for the most part, one of the great things about Joker is not only is it a film about the iconic Bat villain, yes, his origins or where he might have come from, but really it is a film that is asking difficult questions about the real world we live in. What do we owe society? What does our civilization, what do we owe one another when it comes to things like mental health? If you live in Los Angeles, you live in Portland, you live in San Francisco, or you live in Seattle, we have a massive homeless problem that is going unaddressed. Because why? There's no profit in it. The movie addresses that. The movie addresses that there are a lot of people on the streets, wandering the streets, that are not getting the proper health care because, hey, it's not in the budget. And what do we care until they, start some kind of a violent uprising or they're asleep on your morning commuter train when you want to sit down? Who cares, right? Well, this movie is addressing all of these issues in very interesting ways. And it's all wrapped in this bow of being a realistic portrayal of where a character like the Joker may come from. Now, whether you love the movie, whether you like the movie, whether you admire the movie, as I did, you can't get away from the fact, or do you want to get away from the fact, that this movie is making people talk. It is a comic book-derived film that has a lot to say about the real world. It has a lot to say about the world that we are all living in, even though it's a period piece set in 1981. And it asks tough questions. And I think whether you liked the movie or not, again, what I've been saying on my show is the fact that this came out from a major motion picture studio. And look, it ain't show friends, it's show business. They want to make money. They put this movie out to make some cash, and making cash they are. Worldwide, on a reportedly $50 to $60 million budget, this movie's already taken in $240 million, a little over 230 actually. That is a huge epic win. Good for Walter Hamada, good for the future of comic book movies, good for Warner Brothers. And I think the future of comic book movies is where this movie really shines, really excels. It shows that the common idea of what a comic book movie, and when I say comic book movie, I said this before, I know, Ghost World, Road to Perdition, History of Violence, all of those things, American Splendor, yeah, they're all based on comic books. They're all derived from graphic novel properties. But this comes from one of the most iconic characters, Batman. Joker's probably the most iconic comic book villain of all. And the fact that it was used as the basis for this kind of a movie, as shamelessly as it apes Taxi Driver and King of Comedy and a bunch of other films I could name, that's okay. It's a heady stew of familiar and unfamiliar with an amazing lead performance. It's beautifully made. Really, the use of music. There's a lot to admire about this film. I might have been let down, and I'm going to get into that soon, from certain things, but that doesn't mean that I'm right. I do believe that there is an objectivity to films, but there's also a subjectivity as well. And people can like things and disagree about things. That doesn't mean they're right, by the way. I don't think that anybody that all art is not subjective. I don't believe that everybody's opinions are correct. I don't. But that's another issue. But what I do like is there is a lot that people have written to me, both old and new, friends and non-friends, and people I don't know. But man, I love you guys for being so thoughtful. I can't read. I've been getting a deluge of letters. There's no way I can possibly get to everyone's letters. I just can't. I mean, there's a lot of people. Go to the website. There's a lot of familiar letter writers. I gave Willow Yang, of course, her own Willow Talk. I was on our website, the Burnettwork.net. Check that out. Ian Samuels, I think I put up 25 letters of his since July. There's a lot of great letter writers that you guys, I love you guys, and it's so great. Jeffrey Mao. So keep them coming. I'm going to try and get through all these letters. It's just tough. I'm getting more every day, which is a good problem to have. So I did pull out some Joker letters. First one, Liam Kerrigan. I keep thinking that Liam Kerrigan, who lives in Japan, and Lynn Hobday know one another. By the way, I've been listening to Lynn Hobday's music. She sent me some singles. Well, not singles. I guess singles. CD of her music. And talented folks, you people are. Talented folks. But anyway, so first letter comes from Liam in Japan. Liam Kerrigan. Regarding Joker and mental health. Hi, Rob. Greetings once again from Japan. I finally got to see Joker last Friday night. Unlike yourself, I love this movie, and it's best for me that I've seen so far this year. However, amidst all the furor that this film and what some consider to be its message has brought about, there's something that I feel has been ignored since it doesn't fit the narrative that some of our so-called journalists are trying to concoct. As a mental health survivor myself, I have to say that Joker is one of the most accurate, considered, and thoughtful depictions of mental illness I have ever seen on screen. In portraying a character who ultimately becomes a mass-murdering psychopath, it would have been all too easy for Joaquin Phoenix to have simply defaulted to a Jim Carrey-esque, grinning mad, squealing incoherently, pulling funny faces, and dancing through one negative mental health trope after another. Phoenix didn't take the easy option. He has clearly done his research. While I have battled depression and suffered a breakdown in the past, I have never experienced psychosis on the level of Arthur Fleck. However, what was an equal parts heartening and chilling for me was just how much of Arthur's experiences, in the early stages at least, really chimed with my own. I felt that same frustration knowing that the meds aren't working, knowing that you are slowly but surely losing control, losing your sense of perspective, indeed, in the darkest moments, losing your very grip on reality. Friends can seem like enemies, acts of kindness can be met with suspicion, and conversely, you can find yourself developing feelings and affection for people who, in reality, you really don't know at all. I could relate to Arthur's social awkwardness, his misreading of situations, his desperate, heartfelt desire to be liked, and his inability to understand why people do bad things for no other reason than that they can. It all really hit home with me. One moment, pivotal for Arthur in the movie, was a direct parallel to something that happened in my own life. I reached a point in my early 20s where I was seeing a therapist on a regular basis, but it wasn't going anywhere. It was a case of sit there, pour your heart out, and at the end, she makes notes, hands you a prescription for more ineffectual meds, and off you go. Arthur directly confronts his therapist in the movie. He looks her straight in the eye and says, "You're not listening." My therapist and I had that exact same exchange at our final session. The difference is I saw that as a crossroads, after which I ditched that therapist and set about healing myself in other ways. Arthur Fleck never had that opportunity, and it is from that point that you begin to realize he is truly irredeemable. He's going mad, and there's nothing he can do to stop it. Perhaps the Joker would never have come to be if Arthur Fleck had taken a leaf out of my book. I moved to Japan and got laid. Man, I wish I'd done that in my college years. Of course, I would have gotten broke. I would have gotten broke taking Japanese girls out and buying die-cast Gundam figures, or many other figures and models too. But I don't think moving to Japan and gotten laid is probably the best advice anybody has ever sent me here in a letter to convey to the rest of you. Joking aside, though, it is from that point on that I began to lose any real connection that I felt with Arthur. And that is, I believe, intentional on the filmmaker's part. This is where his final support systems collapse and where Arthur's path and my own diverge. I moved to a new country, leaving behind the things that hurt me, the sources of my trauma and my anxiety. More importantly, throughout all of this, I had the unconditional support and love of my parents and my family. Arthur never has any of this. The metaphor of the garbage strike, which runs in the background throughout the movie, is none too subtle here. Like those mounds of trash that are ignored by wider society, the mentally ill are the human garbage of this piece. Cut adrift, deprived of any support, any hope, and left with a harsh choice, let the madness consume you or embrace it and make it a part of you. Arthur chooses the latter, and this is where the Joker is truly born. Most of all, though, I like the way Joker does not patronize or talk down to mental health survivors like myself. It doesn't take sides. Ultimately, whether you choose to believe Arthur's narration that his victims get what they fucking deserve is up to you. To me, Joker is neither a hero nor villain, but a victim. He's a victim of a cold, cynical society whose overriding mantra is, I'm doing all right, so fuck everyone else. It's ironic that so many on the far left went after this movie with such zeal before it came out. As having watched it, I think its strong anti-capitalist, pro-universal healthcare, and anti-establishment messaging is more likely to piss off those on the right than the left. So in closing, I would like to thank Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix for taking this seriously and giving the general public a brief insight into just how tough mental illness is. I'll close with a quote from the Joker himself. The worst part about having a mental illness is that people expect you to behave as if you don't. Thanks as always, Rob, for all that you do, and keep up the good work. Liam Kerrigan. Well, Liam, first of all, thank you for an honest and raw letter like this. I mean, it's funny because I feel, on one hand, I have friends that think it's silly that I do these shows. I have other people that think it's cool. Other people have told me that we're doing something special here. All I know, for me personally, is that when I get letters like this and I get this kind of thoughtful response to what I'm doing, it makes it all worthwhile. I do seem like this is worthwhile doing these shows. There's obviously a connection going on here. The Post-Geek Singularity community is a real one. And I don't know many other shows on YouTube that will have people writing letters like this to me. So, Liam, thank you so much for this thoughtful letter. And I have to say, to hear why you appreciate, to me, this is exactly the kind of insight that I prefer into why people like what they like and how it affects them, and portrayals of things that I might be gravely mentally ill, but I don't know. But I've never gone through the kind of mental health struggles I've witnessed firsthand. obviously that you just described. So to understand how the movie worked for you and why it worked for you, I think is incredibly important. And obviously, I would assume that both Joaquin Phoenix and Todd Phillips, in writing this, did their research. So it's nice to see that it had an authenticity for you. And I think, I think it's great. And I want to again thank you for writing such a thoughtful letter. And it means a lot. It means a lot that you are willing to share. Now, this letter is a little different. This comes from my old friend Kevin Rubio. I've known Kevin for many, many years. We've worked together. I've admired his work. For those of you who don't know, Kevin Rubio really kicked off the whole modern fan film extravaganza with his movie Troops, a very clever, canonical Star Wars movie that is also a parody of the show Cops. I've known Kevin for a long time. He's a great writer and a great friend. And he wrote something here that I also felt worth sharing. Once again, this is from Kevin Rubio, director of Troops. Rob, I think I can count on one hand the number of times in our 30-year history that we have disagreed on a film, but this is one of them, and the film is Joker. See, I choked on that. We're already disagreeing. Now, as a filmmaker, I, of course, respect your appreciation for the way in which this film was crafted and your acknowledgement of the fine performances. I also understand your reasons for why you personally didn't like this take on the Joker. Well, I didn't not like it. I was disappointed by it. I should be very, very clear about that. But being fellow filmmakers, felt compelled to offer up this opposing take. I know you will take it in the spirit in which it was intended, cognitive discourse, and hopefully be an example that lifelong friends can disagree on something and still remain so. Absolutely, sir. In Robservations 240, the crux of your discontent seemed to be that this Joker did not have a philosophy, citing that even Ledger's "some men just want to watch the world burn, though chaotic, is still an ethos." My argument is two parts for Phoenix's incarnation. First, it is illogical. Yes, I'm using a Star Trek reference, thank you. For you to expect a broken mind like Arthur Fleck's to have a codifying ethos and philosophy. The movie clearly shows you that Arthur is not a reliable narrator in the story of his own life. He even spells it out in his journal, and I'm paraphrasing because I've only seen this once. The worst part of having a mental illness is people expect you to behave as if you don't. I believe in your longing for a Joker with a philosophy that you are expecting an insane mind to have a sane thought process. And maybe he can outwit Batman on occasion because Batman is expecting the same thing you are. Which brings me to point number 2. This movie is a good 14 years conservatively from the Joker we will know who matches wits with the Dark Knight. It is not unreasonable to say that he really isn't the Joker until the end of the film. For me personally, without giving any plot points away, I think it's that moment we see in the trailers where he's in full makeup holding the cigarette backstage with a contemplative look on his face, perhaps the beginning of the Joker's, a manifestation. Surely his monologue that follows can be argued as the beginnings of a philosophy that you're seeking, if one that is not codified. I think your expectations for a fully formed Joker and a fully formed ideology from a film that spends the majority of its time showing you Arthur's journey is similar to the fans that expected Henry Cavill's Superman to be the Superman we all know on his first day in the costume, or expecting you to be the filmmaker you are on your first day at USC. All will get there, but not on their first day. That's from Kevin Rubio. Kevin, great letter. And I have to say that that's a very compelling argument, very concise. And I don't disagree with any of this. I don't disagree. And perhaps, I've always said that a lot of genre fans, we imagination connoisseurs, are always judging movies on what we hoped they would be, not what they are. And I freely admit that my criticism of Joker, in that I didn't see that Arthur Fleck had a philosophy. He didn't really even have anything that he wanted yet. Perhaps might have been a little hasty. Now, a lot of people point out that yes, I mean this is a Joker emerging from the womb of whatever societal pressures that created him, and that what happened, what we're watching is the destruction of the human psyche that will later be rebuilt into the Joker. And I think that that's very valid. And I'm just saying that for myself, I wanted a glimmer. There's things at the end of the movie that are going on that I would have preferred that the Joker had more of a sure hand in creating. And that's just me. And I freely admit that. I mean, I was definitely hoping for something different, and ultimately I was sort of let down because I wanted more from the movie it just wasn't there. Now, that doesn't mean the movie was bad. I went on and on and on about how well crafted it was, and I think though it let me down in the writing. And I also, to be fair, one of my favorite movies of all time, and I still think one of the greatest anti-heroes ever portrayed in any medium, is Alex DeLarge from Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange, which is, of course, an adaptation of the book by Anthony Burgess. I actually tend to think that the movie's better than the book. It doesn't matter which ending you're reading. But I thought that there was more, I guess, there was a lot more levels. I guess that's what it is. I felt that the Joker was on the nose the whole time. I mean, I get it. I wanted a little bit more. I wanted more philosophy out of it. I wanted more, but then again, maybe it's because the movie set me up to expect more from it, and that I didn't get what I wanted, because after all, it is a movie called Joker. It is about the origins of the Joker. So perhaps my expectations were a little unrealistic for that film. I'm just saying it's how I felt about it. I stand by my assessment. I really do appreciate that people are loving this movie. And as I touched upon even a little yesterday, it's nice to see a large budget studio releasing a mid-budgeted comic book film of this kind and unleashing it on the public. I'm so astonished and happy that this movie exists. And I think that's a huge triumph. And the fact that it's as good as it is, and there's such great craft on display, that I don't have any issue with that. And clearly, to have a movie that's captured the zeitgeist, I mean, this movie is a zeitgeist moment. Make no mistake. And I love that we have that. I love that it's come out from a major motion picture studio like Warner Brothers. I love that it's making money and it's going to advance the entire genre, as Martin Scorsese. It's so funny that the same week that he complains that he doesn't see the MCU as being legitimate cinema, that a movie comes out that is based on a comic book character that is so heavily influenced by his movies. I can't wait to hear. I want to hear Martin Scorsese weigh in on the Joker and what he thinks about it. So it's pretty great. I'm not done talking about the Joker yet, but I wanted to get over the super chats. Jordy Lyon says, I have a poster from 2011 that shows the Enterprise E shuttle bay with McCall fighters on the roof. Are they canon and in the same ones and the type from DS9? You know what, Jordy? I'd have to see a picture. I don't know. But interesting. If it's from 2011, I would assume that maybe it's canonical. I love that McCall fighters. I mean, after Robert McCall, the great space artist, I do love that. I think that's cool, but I don't know. I'd have to see it. I'd have to see it. Let's see. Where are we here? Anthony Gonzalez says, would you rather see a fight between Worf and Chewie, a conversation between Spock and Yoda, or business dealings between Quark and Lando? You know what? Give me the conversation between Spock and Yoda. I would love to see that. I would love to see Yoda spout off about the Force and Spock talking about how the Force isn't what he's saying. The Force has there's a scientific basis, and Spock would explain the science, and Yoda would explain, no, you've got it all wrong. You can't quantify it the way you are. I think it'd be great. I'd love to see that. My dinner with Spock and Yoda. I would love to see that. That's why I like that idea. Timula the Spider Monkey is here. Going to see Joker tonight. Can't wait. Well, that is pretty amazing. Yeah, can't wait for that. You got to come back and tell me what you think. Joseph, the great artist Joseph, says, Rob, Google Toys Era 6 scale The Comedian and enjoy. Okay, I will. I'm going to do that right now for you since you asked me to. But I have to say that I do have the Hot Toys Comedian. Now, I'll tell you something funny. So everyone knows my love of Hot Toys. And let's see, I'm looking for, that's pretty great. That is a great looking figure. That's not the laughter. That looks great. I thought I was about to see the comedian from Watchmen. I'll tell you, I was going to tell you a story, but I won't then. Who cares? This is a great looking figure. Wow, that is pretty terrific. But that's the Gotham era. I like that. It's good. Looks good. And it's the second version they did. I'm in. Count me in. Willow Yang says, is Taxi Driver to blame for inspiring John Hinckley Jr. to try and assassinate Ronald Reagan? Well, that's what he said. He wanted to impress Jodie Foster, right? Wasn't that it? I honestly don't think that any one thing should ever be said to be the inspiration behind doing anything. I think Taxi Driver, like the Joker, had a lot to say to a lot of different people, but you can't say that a movie is to blame for inspiring anybody to carry out an act of violence, because that takes away the agency from the person. It's interesting. Before I made Free Enterprise with Mark Altman, we were working on an idea I had. Our investor, I've talked about this on the show before, but it was a horror movie steeped in Yiddish folklore, Jewish folklore, basically. And we called it Day of Atonement. It's too late to be forgiven. And in the story, I wanted to explore the ideas of anti-Semitism and why throughout history people have hated Jews so much. And in it, it has a supernatural reason. And I realized I had a conversation with somebody about this and how I wanted to do this story similar. And somebody pointed something out to me and they said, if you were to say that the roots of anti-Semitism are indeed supernatural, you're taking away the agency. You're excusing anti-Semitic behavior throughout history, not the least of which was the Holocaust. You're trying to say that men aren't responsible. Mankind isn't responsible. That there is a supernatural agency that is causing this. And that's not the kind of message you want to convey. And I was like, wow, that's true. It's the same thing when Gene Roddenberry would get mad when people used to suggest that ancient aliens built the pyramids. And he would say, that's not true. Men built the pyramids because human beings are awesome. Men, when I say men, I mean women, I mean all people, everybody who was enslaved back then. They built the pyramids. And I like that idea. Now, of course, we have so much UFO activity going on everywhere. Who knows? But I'd like to think that you should never excuse or take away the reasons people do things and say it's because of something else. Seeing a movie does not make somebody do something. It doesn't inspire. I don't know. I mean, but there's a lot of other factors that were involved. Movies aren't real. And I don't think so. Magic Case says, fun fact, John said in his show, China might help Joker catch up to Venom's box office number. Meanwhile, the Joker was not showing in mainland China uh, because of the plot. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know that Joker has not opened in China. I don't know if their government, the Chinese government, would actually want Joker to be playing, but I would think it'd be very interesting. You know, obviously China is uh, a global powerhouse, and they are going to be the nation that the United States is going to be butting heads with for a long time to come. And I think one of the things that we need to start doing, besides looking upon them as a communist country, is to understand, well, how do people think? Elizabeth's mom's husband, her stepfather, has gone to China and worked. He's a doctor and worked in Chinese hospitals with Chinese doctors. And there's interesting cultural differences about how they handle um, doctoring, healthcare, and it's fascinating. And I think, look, that's where we have to start. That's where we have to start looking. And I would be very interested to hear what the Chinese perspective is on a movie like The Joker. How do their film going audiences see it? How do their healthcare professionals see it? It'd be very interesting. And I don't know if the movie poses a threat. It'll be interesting to see if it does ever open in mainland China, how it is received. I'd be very, very curious. I don't know. Jordy Lyon says, could you explain to my 8-year-old son why he can't see the Joker? I would say that he is too young to understand what's happening. And the best way to see Joker is to first research all of the other forms of the Joker that existed before this one. Cesar Romero on the 60s Batman show, various incarnations of the Joker in comic books, Joker in the 70s, for instance. So you got to get him comic books. You got to get the Batman animated series on Blu-ray or whatever physical media you have, and take him through an education of the Joker for the next 8 years. And when he's 16, then you can see the Joker. Tell him he doesn't know enough. He has to understand more about the Joker before he can see this movie. Otherwise, it'll be over his head, and it'll give him nightmares for the rest of his life. I don't know how well I did, not being a father myself. I hope maybe that came close. He's got a lot of research to do, and there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. James Lockman is here. Aloha, Rob, my howly brother. I love that. Howly brother. That's that. Howley is basically a white dude. If you're Hapa, you're mixed. Howley's white. I am not a Pacific Islander, but I do love Hawaii. That Mandalorian hot toy figure looks awesome. I have only 4 hot toys, 2 Darth Mauls, a 6-scale Han Solo frozen in carbonite, and a 6-scale Boba Fett. I want the Darth Maul bust. Well, you got to get it. That Mandalorian looks great. I was just poking around my Hot Toys Stormtrooper, which I'm happy with. I have so many Stormtroopers from different companies. But thank you for supporting the channel, and I will always be your Howley brother. And thank you for that. Did you pre-order the Mandalorian? You could pre-order it you can pre-order it now at sideshowtoy.com if you're in North America. It doesn't come out for literally a year. So that's frustrating. But yeah, you got the 2 Mauls. Are you going to get you got to get Vader and Tarkin because they're great. Get that Vader and Tarkin 2-pack. It comes with the chair. Everybody who knows me knows that I have an action figure chair fetish. Any action figure that comes with a chair. I don't know why. I just love chairs. I love action figure chairs. I got Shuri sitting behind me in the throne of Wakanda. I mean, what doesn't make you happy about that? Here's another letter from Franz Morhart. This is an interesting one. Franz is obviously an old school member of the Post-Geek Singularity community, as old school as you can be in 10 months, but he's written a lot. For the most part, internet trolls do not exist. A troll is someone who states an insincere belief by exaggerating how they feel or outright lying, purely to get a reaction out of you. Almost nobody does this. What a lot of people will do is offer a critique phrased in an amusing way because most of us generally try to make amusing comments instead of boring ones. Such comments usually trigger someone somewhere. These triggered people label triggering beliefs as trolling because they can't cope with the fact that there are other people who wildly disagree with them, and they want to dismiss the opposing viewpoints without having to engage in an exchange of ideas. Joker is a joke of a movie. An entire film insincerely deep and trolling its audience into outrage and box office success for all the wrong reasons. It is an overlong, Oscar Beatty origin story character study of the most overused character in the Batman canon, which is cliched, predictable, and transparently pandering to pretentious peacocks successfully by parroting far better movies, which, surprise, most of them have not seen, even as it erases essential elements from the DNA of its titular character. Joker is like its namesake in that it is a calculatedly combustible, mostly competent cocktail, a poisonous potion provided to stir up toxically political polemics on both sides and ride the wave of controversy to the top of the box office. A chaos-driven scheme as worthy of the Joker moniker as Arthur is not. Instead of this trite Nolan Scorsese-esque crime shit, smart potential viewers should rewatch Taxi Driver instead, because if backstage political drama is enough to make you flock to this flick and flood it with critical praise, you just might be disappointingly relevant but unrecognizably dumb as the Joker in 2019. Franz coming out swinging with an alternative point of view, which I thought worth sharing. Really enjoyed that. I thought that was great. I liked how you didn't mince words there. But again, I read what you wrote and I'm like, I see that. I especially agree with you that the film does borrow shamelessly from King of Comedy, and it does borrow from Taxi Driver, both of which I think are better films than The Joker. They might not be as palatable or as fun to watch for imagination connoisseurs, but they certainly are worth checking out, and you'll see a lot of things. But you're right, there's a lot of people that, oh, these are just like Scorsese's King of Comedy and Taxi Driver, and a lot of viewers out there who are saying those things haven't even seen those movies. So good letter, really enjoyed it, and it was a good counterpoint to what in fact we have been hearing about. This one comes from Emil Johansson. Emil is a longtime member of the Post-Geek Singularity community. He's always here. He's always supportive. He's always fun to interact with. And another letter about the Joker. Why I like Arthur Fleck as the Joker, he writes. He was dumb. He wasn't scary. He had no manifesto. I don't think a villain with more intimidation, a clear goal, and some kind of intelligence would be a bad villain. That's kind of how General Zod was, or Bane in The Dark Knight Returns, or Dark Knight Rises. Bane was a threat to Batman because of his physicality, and he was menacing as a sort of fanatic. He also had a proper motivation. The things he did were not just random. He knew what he wanted, and he worked towards that. I think, though, for this particular story, I prefer the villain to be like Arthur was. This is why I like him. I'm not saying he's a better villain, but this is why I like this type of villain. 1, realism. 2, moral confusion. 3, notoriety. 1, I think Arthur being dumb makes him more of a believable character. If he was smart, why wouldn't he be a good person? Or take himself out of his miserable situation, or chaotic mind, or go to Japan and get laid, and not feel the need to do bad things. Stupid people are capable of doing bad things too. And I think it's interesting seeing the world from a perspective where you don't have all the answers. The Joker can't escape the law, the police, or whatever. He can't keep a job. He can't find a girlfriend in this story. That makes his life tough, but it also makes the story very real. In real life, we don't all have the answers to everything. We don't all understand how to be successful or how to get the girl, but we have to struggle and live through it anyway because that is life. And that the Joker is not exempt in this story gives him, I think, humanity, which is something at least I don't see often done in a memorable way where there is a person behind all the drama. 2, in Batman Begins, they say it's not who you are underneath, but what you do that defines you. What if the personality you have is different than what your actions express? What if people can't control their emotions and they snap and do all sorts of crazy things, but when they're calm, they're actually really nice people? If you meet them with a blank slate, you might think they're completely normal, but if you knew what they would do when the chips are down, you'd be terrified of them. To me, Arthur embodies that. Someone who, on the surface, looks like a civilized person trying to stay good in a bad world, but then you realize he has all of these horrible thoughts and does all of these horrible things. This stuff makes you think, and I think the moral confusion is very interesting. It kind of pushes people into thinking for themselves, deciding what is good or bad, regardless of who seems to be the victim or not. 3, no matter how smart or how strong the villains are, they usually fail almost mathematically so that the forces of good can prevail and the story won't be a bad one. This makes villains, in my opinion, pretty forgettable in the end. We have so much distance between us and them that they lack value. They lack humanity. They are monsters and forces of destruction. It makes it okay for us to do whatever we want them to do. And we aren't really fighting other people. We're sort of just fighting our own inner battles. For a villain to stand out, to lead a movie, I think you need a type of villain like Arthur Fleck because he is not one-dimensional. Sure, he might not go toe-to-toe with the greatest detective who can, but he creates a name for himself. He creates a legend, just like Batman did in Batman Begins. Unlike most villains, he forces you to understand that behind the mask is a person capable of doing all of these horrible things. It doesn't mean he's justified, but it's real, it's there, and he is taken seriously. He is not just the obstacle for the protagonist to overcome. He is his own person with his own story and his own life that doesn't depend on someone else defeating him or not. He doesn't need to win. He doesn't need to care. Maybe we don't matter to the villains of our stories, but we don't want to face that truth, their reality. So we pretend to be important while telling ourselves that what is truly real. And on the other side of that story is falsehoods. I hope this enlightens why I like this incarnation of a supervillain. Again, different villains are not bad, but this is why I like this villain for this type of story. Thanks, Emil. Well, Emil, I think that's great. I love that idea. I really like this this last here. Maybe we don't matter to the villains of our own stories, but we don't want to face that truth, their reality. So we pretend to be important while telling ourselves that is what is truly real. And the other side of the story is false. Great letter, man. Again, all of these letters about the Joker, I can't like them more. It's really incredible. It's really incredible that you guys are coming through this way and writing these kinds of letters because it's incredibly fascinating to me. I really enjoy what everybody has to say. Orville Nation says, hi, RMB. Have you watched all of the Orville episodes? I have indeed. I've watched all of the Orville. I quite like it. My overall opinion of the Orville, though, is that I find the episodes to be rather hit and miss. I haven't seen one that I thought was awful, but a lot of the time, I think the personal drama, there's a lot of personal issues that vaguely skate the edge of science fiction. And I would like to see more science fiction in the Orville when they're dealing with personal issues, but it's still pretty good. I'm a big fan. I like the Orville. Factual Opinion says, I hated TNG's Darmok, just awful. Well, Factual Opinion, for those of you who don't know what Darmok is, I want to say it's an episode, is it 5th season? I think it's 5th season. Where Captain Picard meets Captain Dathon, played by Paul Winfield, who is this alien, and the Captain Dathon, they communicate in metaphor essentially. Our arms spread, our arms wide, and they have to figure out how are they going to communicate and And they basically communicate through story, really, not just sentences, but actual story as metaphor. It's really, I thought, interesting. That episode, I think the concept of it is greatly beloved. I don't think it's a very good episode. I do like Winfield's performance, Captain Terrell from Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, but I don't necessarily think it's the greatest episode of Star Trek, and it's kind of got a silly monster in it that I don't really understand why it's there. I mean, I do, but I don't think it's awful. I think it's got an interesting science fiction concept that gives it, people tend to give it a pass, and that sometimes could be enough. Jordy Lyon says, could DC paint themselves into a corner with their DC Black label if the fans demand this type of movie? One and done, they said. Could this cause problems? Here's the thing. If a movie works, if a studio puts up money and it makes money and people go see it and it becomes part of the conversation, as this movie obviously has, everybody wins. Whatever you want to call it. I mean, I think this is an example where you take a passionate filmmaker, you allow his vision to bubble forth. And it was, make no mistake, this film, it was really ballsy of Walter Hamada and his team at Warner Brothers to allow this movie to get made. They could have easily gone a different direction. They could have gone in a more pulp-friendly direction that could have been more, dare I say, family-friendly than what we got here. And I think what we got here is truly amazing. It's truly astonishing that a studio would allow this movie to get made. So don't I don't worry about what's going to happen in the future. I think we should enjoy this movie for what it is, and hopefully we're going to have other filmmakers who want to take on other characters and give it this kind of treatment, not the anti-hero necessarily Joker treatment, but the fact that they can make one-off films that really explore the character the way even in comic books a great Elseworlds Tale does. I mean, I thought this was a really great approach, and I want to see more of it. And I don't think that we should limit Warner Brothers to whatever they're going to do, nor should we limit filmmakers. I mean, as much as I like Vertigo or the Ultimates universe, I don't necessarily think DC or Warner Brothers should start branding these movies as a specific thing, because then you limit what this specific thing can be. I want more. I mean, it doesn't. Why does it have to be so dark, and why does it have to be so desperate and cynical and not exactly life affirming? Could you have I would love to see, like, let's say if somebody made a Booster Gold movie, and you actually made it a really interesting look. Like, what would it be for a time traveler from the future to come back to Earth now with all of this technology and frame himself as a capitalist superhero? But you did it with Joker realism. I think that could be really interesting, and it certainly wouldn't necessarily be dark, but I wouldn't want to limit. I wouldn't want the studio to start branding these things too far out of the gate. I just want to see one-offs and have them do creative takes on these characters. I think that'd be the best. Tim asks, Timbula Spider Monkey says, the Blob original or remake, which do you prefer? Well, I think Chuck Russell's remake of The Blob is pretty terrific. And obviously the 50s Blob, there is a tongue-in-cheek element to that movie that you can't get away from. It's still got stuff that's horrifying in it, but it's called The Blob. It's a little hard to deal with. However, Chuck Russell's movie, I think, is much more effective. His remake of The Blob from the late 80s is much more effective, if only because it's more of a serious take. But I saw The Blob when I was a little kid, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. But I recognized later that it's pretty goofy. But given a choice that they were both sitting in front of me right now, I would probably take the remake of The Blob. But I don't think the remake of The Blob is, say, up to The Fly or Philip Kaufman's Invasion of the Body Snatchers. I don't think that's true. Dan V900 says, the criticism that annoys me the most with Joker is that it has disturbing violence. These same critics praised Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which had a woman's face get bashed in. It's hypocritical. Well, Dan, that's a great point. I mean, here's the thing about the violence in Joker is it's portrayed absolutely realistically with a lot of verisimilitude, whereas the stylized violence in Once Upon a Time in America is not presented in a realistic fashion at all. I mean, it is extreme, the extreme violence, but the premise of what's even happening is already changing history, you can't take it seriously. I mean, it's still harsh, but there is, I think, an element of removal. You're removing the audience when they know you're playing fast and loose with history. So what you're watching is inherently unreal. So the violence, I know this is such a weird thing to say, but the way violence is presented in films is very, very important. Like I've told people, I mean, there's a rape scene in A Clockwork Orange that I don't find unbearable, but the rape scene in Gaspar Noé's Irreversible, I literally cannot watch. There's never been a moment where I've been able to sit and watch that scene all the way through. I can't watch it. I physically can't watch that kind of violence being perpetrated on a woman. It disturbs me so much. And it's the way it's presented. And I don't necessarily think it is hypocritical because context is everything. And the violence in Joker is very, very realistically portrayed, and it's very realistically perpetrated. The violence is very much realistically done. Whereas it's really difficult to take Once Upon a Time in Hollywood seriously, even though you can't help but laugh. The violence is extreme, but there's an element of cartoonishness there. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Your mileage may vary. Victory Unlimited show is here. Ladies and gentlemen, Victory Unlimited is here. I love it when the Victory Unlimited show arrives. Good to see you, sir. Victory Unlimited says, first of all, thanks for always supporting the channel. Victory Unlimited says, many critics say Joker, Dark Knight, and Logan transcend to elevate the comic book movie genre, but I see this as condescending since nearly all movies can be categorized as some genre or another. What's your take on film snobs? Well, that's a good question. And I think when it comes to comic book movies as in general, the entire comic book genre, at least specifically in America, in European countries and in Asian countries, the graphic storytelling tradition has a much longer history, at least in terms of things, panel design, stuff like that. Here in the United States, the comic book genre has been sort of ghettoized. It's considered lowbrow. It's considered the bastard stepchild. Like, oh, let's put that over there. Let's put it in the Warsaw Ghetto and lock it up. We don't want to take it seriously. It's for kids. Superman's able to leap tall buildings at a single bound. Look, I think truly The Dark Knight and Logan are still very much comic book movies. I think the Joker, and to a certain extent, Road to Perdition, Ghost World, but Road to Perdition and Ghost World are pretty accurate representations of the original source material. So even though the original source material were comic books or graphic novels, those movies were presented in a realistic way, and they're very faithful adaptations of the comics for the most part. But this Joker completely takes out, other than the fact that we know that Thomas Wayne and Bruce Wayne and Alfred and the Joker are from a comic book, they are presented in a very, yes, it's sort of hyper real. Yes, it is got a Blade Runner-esque quality to 1981 because it's so beautifully photographed. But there aren't any shreds what the comic book genre can fall back on, whether it's mutant superheroes or whether it's a man with a painted face like in The Dark Knight. You still have Batman showing up. You still have Batman using his gadgets. This movie has none of that. Joker completely takes away, it's complete demystification, demystifies the whole genre. And I think it really does. Now, I think the Logan and The Dark Knight, sure, they're more set squarely in the real world than other comic book movies, but they are absolutely comic book movies. Logan's seriousness, the fact that you're dealing with Professor X losing his marbles and all that, and the way it's shot, you're far, far removed from the mutant world of the X-Men. You're in the real world. You're set in the real world. And what I love about it is I think everybody has always wanted to see, what does it look like if a superhero What would Logan, as a mutant with mutant healing powers and an adamantium skeleton, what would a guy like that, who's basically, 150 years old or whatever, how would he exist in our world? And I think Logan did a good job of that, but he's still a mutant. Whereas Arthur Fleck, being a mentally disturbed man who has real mental issues, they've demystified, they've taken all of the comic book genre, for the most part, out of Joker. And there isn't any of that pulp sensibility left. It's been entirely removed. There is a huge pulp sensibility left in both Dark Knight and in Logan. Not so much in Joker. And I think Joker, of all the comic book movies, certainly of all the superheroes / now I guess supervillain movies, I just call them all, superhero movies. I just do, because Joker's part of the Batman mythos. So I think it's the first time a superhero movie has been that's based on, there have been other chances like Hancock, which is hit or miss, Fast Color, great demystification of is that a word? I don't know, but Fast Color, a very interesting film about three generations of Black women that also happen to be superheroes. So there is a lot of, although even Fast Color it falls into the comic book genre more, whereas Joker really doesn't. You could tell that exact same story if that movie was called Fred and it was the exact same movie, and you changed Thomas Wayne's name, so there was and maybe the name of Gotham City, and the movie was about Fred, this sad sack mentally ill clown. The movie would still absolutely work, and nobody would make that connection that it was ever came out of any kind of a comic book. So I think that's what people are trying to say. And look, what's interesting too is that there's a lot of people that are huge comic book movie fans that don't have a lot of knowledge of the rest of cinema. They're not watching Bergman, they're not watching Antonioni, they're not watching Truffaut, they're not watching, I keep saying Ozu because I like Ozu. They're not watching Kurosawa. They're not watching Saji Rei's Apu trilogy. They don't even know what I'm talking about, but they know comic book movies. So for them, this is the first time for a lot of people that they're going to see a comic book character that has left such a mark in their imaginations as being completely demystified in the real world. And they haven't seen Taxi Driver, and they haven't seen King of Comedy. So they don't know any of these movies. So when they come to Joker, it's mind-blowing for them because it's the first time they've encountered something like this. So you're right, Victory Unlimited. This can be categorized as a genre film. It is. But it could also not be. It could not be a genre movie, really, if you took out a lot of, if we didn't know, like I said, it was called Fred, and you saw the same movie, would anybody consider it part of the comic book genre? I think what's truly great about this film is it has transcended the genre of comic book movie, which means it hasn't, because it's still a comic book movie, which means that it's changed the genre of what comic book movies can be. So in transcending the genre, it's changed the genre, and the genre has grabbed it back. It's just what we think of as a superhero movie or a comic book based movie has expanded with Joker. And I think that's really cool. I think it's really great. That might be the greatest thing about the movie. Maybe. One never knows. But that's just a thought that I had. Now, let's see. Evan Newman says, which characters do you want to see have their own one-off film like Joker? A Mr. Freeze movie using Paul Dini's story as a guide could be great. I'll tell you, Evan, my problem with that was by making it Mr. Freeze, you've still got all this technology you're going to have to deal with. Like, how does Mr. Freeze become Mr. Freeze? I think the one thing about Joker is he isn't a crazy member of Batman's rogues gallery in the sense, hey, I believe that means young Sophie is home from school. Either that or someone is at the door, which I can't deal with. Somebody's at the door. I can't answer that. They'll have to go around. Of course, I could get up, but I'm not going to. Yo, you guys. Hey. Come on. So Dan V900 says, Anyway, you know what? I'm not going to get up. I'm going to make somebody come around because it's not my department. Oh, anyway, go get him. So Dan V900 says Nathan Fillion said he wanted to play Booster Gold. Yeah, people are banging on the door, and it's Sophie who lives here. So, anyway, you know what I'm gonna do? See, this is what you deal with. This is a 16-year-old girl who won't open the gate, won't open the locker to come through. We'll just bang on the door. She could be in the house by now. She won't. But anyway, I'm not gonna do it. Hey, would you cut it out? Cut it out. Cut it out. So I don't think that, back to the question at hand, I was talking about Mr. Freeze. I don't think that Mr. Freeze is the kind of character that is the kind of character that you could do a Joker movie with, is what I was trying to say. And I think you could do it for something like the Riddler, somebody that doesn't have a superhuman bent to them. Because once you get into the superhuman world, then you get into comic book cliches, and it's harder to deal with. Like, I don't know how to how you would do that, because once you get into super science or you get into mutant powers, could you do a character study like Joker? Because that character is not based. He's not based on anything that is traditionally comic booky, if that makes any kind of sense. I don't know. I really don't know. So, you know what? Since Sophie can't get in the door, I'm just going to bring this chat to an end. And I'm going to end this because no one here is here. So I'm just going to go open the door. And I'm going to end this chat. So this will be the end of Robservations, show number 200. This is what I live with, people. Show number 242. It was a great show. I want to thank everybody. I want to thank my moderators. I want to thank all the people that watch, all of you imagination connoisseurs. I want to thank Lucky Tiger for sponsoring this show, for those men who want to look good and feel great. And I want to thank all the people that send in super chats. And I want to say, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. Now, I'm going to end this great chat, which was a great show, because, what can you do? But remember, as always, have a better day.